The rules of this world were written by men, in the arenas, in the boardrooms, in the shadows where dreams were decided before the bell ever rang. Women, they were never meant to be the headline. They were the eye candy, the intermission, the ornaments who danced around the real players. But these walls built by men were never going to hold back the storm known as the man. She rewrote the script, torched it, signed her name in the ashes, and forced them to watch. She wasn't born into legacy. She didn't have a last name dripping in gold. She came from Dublin's forgotten streets, brawling her way into indie halls, fighting through concussions, doubts, and exile. She clawed into developmental. Alongside Charlotte, Sasha, and Bayley, she was the one who held the first grain of the women's revolution in her hand. But no matter how much she bled for the crown, the system still handed the throne to the royalties. She was never more than the sidekick in someone else's story, the afterthought, until she flipped the script. She stopped playing the underdog. She became the reckoning. She called herself the man, and when they laughed, she made them bow. She never begged for the main event. She stole it. She headlined WrestleMania, held both belts high above her head, and made the world look her in the eye. But the climb was never the hard part. The hard part was what came after, when the cheers turned into whispers. When the same fans who carried her to the mountaintop turned their backs the moment she became the one at the top of the food chain. They didn't see themselves in her anymore. They saw a queen who refused to kneel. But she spat back at the fans who forgot. She turned her back on the locker room she helped build. She crowned herself the villain they always wanted her to be. Now, when she walks inside her ring, it's not the naive girl from Dublin. She's done fighting for your love. She's done being your hero. She was the storm that built the empire, and the executioner who will tear it down, brick by bitter brick. This is the story of an outcast who became the face of the revolution, the man who shattered the ceiling, and the queen who now rules the wreckage. This is the story of Becky Lynch. The crown never feels as heavy as the day you finally put it on. Becky Lynch learned that the hard way. April 8th, 2019, WrestleMania 35, the night the world bent the knee, the night the man stood alone at the top of the mountain. First woman to headline WrestleMania, alongside Charlotte Flair and Ronda Rousey. First woman to win the main event. First to hold both world championships above her head. For one night, Becky Lynch was untouchable. The main event. The face of an industry that told women like her they weren't needed. She forced their hands. She broke the barrier by becoming more over than the guys. The fans dragged her to the top, but the same crowd that lifts you will be the first to dig your grave. It's an age-old story. The peasants rally behind one of their own as they fight for the throne. They see themselves in the struggle. They love the climb. They love the fight. They love watching the underdog steal the crown. But they don't love the king. Because once you wear the crown, they stop seeing themselves in you. And then, they drag you down to their level. It happened to Cody. It happened to Sammy. It happened to every babyface champion. And it happened to Becky. She felt it in the silence between the chants, in the way the cheers softened into whispers. The same crowd that once roared her name now watched, with cold eyes, waiting for the stumble. They didn't want her anymore. They wanted the next Becky Lynch. They wanted the next climb. She wasn't the underdog anymore, because she was the empress, and the empire always burns. But before the crown, before the titles, before the main event, long before arenas echoed with the man chants, she was just Rebecca Quinn, a misfit from Dublin, born into a world that expected nothing from her. Her father was mostly absent. Her mother, a flight attendant, raised her on her own, floating from place to place, paycheck to paycheck. Athleticism didn't come naturally to her. She wasn't disciplined. Nobody looked at her and saw potential. She was the kind of girl people overlooked. Her teenage years were a storm of drinking, street fights, dead-end jobs, and worse decisions. She wasn't supposed to become anything. Until one day in 2002, she walked into a crumbling wrestling school in Bray, County Wicklow. It was run by a skinny kid named Fergal Devitt, the man the world would later know as Finn Balor. As a kid, she watched wrestling with her brother. Mick Foley was her hero, not because he won, but because she saw herself in him. A misfit, a broken soul stitched together by defiance. A man who didn't shine, he bled, he fell, and he got back up. That's what wrestling meant to her back then. Just survival. Just a place where pain meant you mattered, where someone like her could finally belong. She was the only girl in the gym, the weakest, the least skilled, but she trained like her life depended on it, because it did. Within months, she was working under a new name, Rebecca Knox. She fought in barns, tents, bingo halls, and back alley gyms. Ireland wasn't enough. She packed a bag, flew to Canada, and bled on every mat she could find. Germany, Japan, the UK. She fought anyone. Men, women, giants, champions. It didn't matter. She wasn't chasing a dream. She was clawing her way out of the dark. By 2006, people started whispering her name, Rebecca Knox. A name with weight, a star in shimmer, the all-women's promotion out of Chicago. Her stiff, aggressive style caught eyes. Her raw, unapologetic voice made people listen. But wrestling takes as much as it gives. In 2006, during a match in Germany, it all snapped. One bump, one concussion. But this one hit different. Her 8th cranial nerve was damaged. She was 19 years old, and the doctors couldn't promise anything, except that her career might be over. So she walked away. Rebecca Knox disappeared. Rebecca Quinn took her place, a flight attendant now, just like her mother. For 2.5 years, she tried to forget the ring. She tried acting, martial arts, but nothing stuck. Nothing filled the hole. She watched old matches like a ghost watching her own grave. In 2011, she stepped back in, just once, as a manager at a Shimmer show. But it wasn't enough. Then fate intervened. One lunch with Finn changed everything. He looked at her and saw what the mirror had been screaming for years. She still had it. And more importantly, she never really lost it. If you're gonna regret it in 10 years, why not just go back now? That was all it took. Around the same time, she booked a stunt role on the TV series Vikings. The role forced her to train again. She felt it. The ring never really left her. She emailed WWE, took the shot, and in April 2013, they opened the door. She reported to the Performance Center in Orlando. They gave her a name, Becky Lynch. They gave her a gimmick, a cartoonish Irish dancer in green, skipping to the ring with fake smiles and worse music. She hated it, said her debut was worse than the Shockmasters, but she swallowed the cringe, because she wasn't there to be cute. She was there to fight. She worked the bottom of the card. She lost. A lot. She watched from the crowd while others rose, but she never stopped sharpening her blade. And when NXT's women's division exploded in 2014, Paige, Emma, Charlotte, Sasha, Bayley, Becky was there. Not in the spotlight, not in the front, but close. Close enough to burn. Becky Lynch found herself in their orbit, but even in that orbit, she was the extra. The 4 horsewomen. Charlotte had the pedigree. Sasha had the swagger. Bayley had the heart. Becky was the one they forgot to name. At TakeOver Rival, she stood across from Charlotte, Sasha, and Bayley and proved she belonged. At TakeOver Unstoppable, she pushed Sasha Banks to the brink for the NXT Women's Championship. She lost, but the crowd stood. They sang her name. For the first time, the world saw Becky Lynch as something more than filler. But just as she started to find her rhythm in NXT, the call-up came. July 13th, 2015. Stephanie McMahon walked onto Raw and declared the women's revolution. Charlotte, Sasha, and Becky debuted together. Becky thought this was it. She thought the fight was over. She thought the revolution meant something, but not for her. They threw her into a faction with Paige and Charlotte, PCB. Charlotte got the titles, Paige got the promos, Becky got the background, but Becky kept the receipts. She waited. She watched. She didn't break. The brand split in 2016 gave her air. SmackDown drafted her as their top woman. She became the inaugural SmackDown Women's Champion. Her first gold. A moment that felt like a shift, but like everything else, it slipped. Alexa Bliss took the title. Charlotte took the spotlight. Becky faded back into the shadows. The hardest worker in the room, but still not the main character. 2 years passed. City to city, match to match. No buzz, no plan, no push, until she finally snapped. SummerSlam 2018, triple threat. Charlotte, Carmella, Becky. The script was obvious. The company gave it to Charlotte, again. So Becky turned. She dropped Charlotte with fists full of history and betrayal. The crowd had been waiting. They didn't boo. They roared. They cheered the betrayal like it was justice. But WWE didn't turn with her. They kept her heel, even as the crowd begged to make her their hero. For months, Becky treaded water. trapped in a story that didn't understand her rise. She had done everything in her power to climb. She worked, bled, evolved. But the moment that changed everything didn't come from hard work. It came from an accident. And that accident rewrote the future. November 2018. Becky led a SmackDown invasion of Raw, a blur of fists, boots, chaos. Then it happened. Nia Jax threw a punch that broke her face. Her nose shattered, blood spilled, thick, red, glorious. Her face was mangled, her vision swam, but she didn't crumble. She stood in the crowd, that image. It shattered the internet. It broke the walls they built around her. It birthed the man. She couldn't fight at Survivor Series. Doctors pulled her, but they couldn't stop what had already begun. That moment wasn't in the script. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. And it turned Becky Lynch into myth. From that point on, everything changed. Her promos cut deeper. Her matches hit harder. The crowd got louder. She had been ignored, dismissed, replaced. Now, she was undeniable. The months that followed launched her into the stratosphere. She fought wars with Asuka, went to hell with Charlotte. She won the Royal Rumble. And then, she stood across from Ronda Rousey. A collision too big to ignore. So big that even a company that never saw women as main eventers had no choice. April 7th, 2019. The lights burned brighter that night. Becky Lynch stood in the main event of WrestleMania 35. A moment written into history's spine, soiled. The match was built on Becky's undeniable momentum and Ronda Rousey's mainstream allure. But Charlotte Flair was inserted, not earned, but handed. A move that felt like legacy maintenance, not necessity. The ending didn't help. Ronda refused to tap pre-match. Becky's pin came with Ronda's shoulder off the mat. She didn't even try to sell it. There was no closure, just confusion. Still, the image remained. Becky Lynch, holding 2 titles above her head. Becky 2 belts. The first woman to win the WrestleMania main event. An industry that had never seen women as equals forced to kneel before the man. But a victory meant to end in thunder, ended in silence. Because the same crowd that crowned you their warrior will one day wonder why you're still standing. Becky felt it early. The chants softened. The noise thinned. Her post-WrestleMania run started quiet. Lacey Evans, Natalya, a mixed tag with Seth Rollins. Then Sasha Banks returned. At Hell in a Cell, they tore into each other inside steel. A match that defined the era. But the whispers didn't stop. Becky wasn't the underdog anymore. She was standing atop the mountain, and they started turning. Even her redemptive win over Asuka at Royal Rumble, a payoff from a year prior, couldn't shift the tide. She was too protected, too dominant. The rebel had become the queen. Then the unexpected happened. May 11th, 2020. Becky opened Raw with the Money in the Bank briefcase in her hands. But there was no contract inside, only the Raw Women's title. In a moment as real as anything WWE has ever broadcast, she handed the belt to Asuka and said, "You go and be a warrior, 'cause I'm gonna go be a mother." The fans at home, locked in silence by a pandemic, celebrated her. But under the surface, something else lingered. Relief. The reign was over. The threat was gone. Becky 2 belts had vanished, and in her place, absence. 15 months passed. August 21st, 2021. SummerSlam. Las Vegas. Bianca Belair stood in the ring, fresh off her own historic WrestleMania moment. Then, Becky's music hit. The roof blew off. Absence had made the heart grow louder. And then, in 26 seconds, it turned. Manhandle slam. 1, 2, 3. The cheer became unease. This wasn't the man. This was something colder, something calculated. She became Big Time Becks. Designer sunglasses, coats that screamed wealth, promos that dripped ego. She dressed like money, walked like royalty, but the crowd saw it. They turned. They called her Becky Hogan, said she buried Bianca, said she hijacked the spotlight. Becky heard it and didn't flinch. She leaned into the venom, held the title hostage, beat Liv Morgan, dodged Bianca, until WrestleMania 38. Bianca beat her, clean, a classic. Becky lay staring at the lights while the crowd celebrated her successor, and something broke. She spiraled, lost to Liv, lost to Asuka, lost control. Her promos cracked. She called the fans fickle, called them cowards, told them she built this, but they didn't care. So she walked, again. Late 2022. She returned with fire in her eyes. War games, steel cage fights. The man was back. She fought with Lita, fought alongside Trish, then fought against her. Beat Trish Stratus inside a steel cage, bloodied and vindicated. And somewhere across the ocean, in a small Irish home, a girl watched. Years earlier, Becky had found her fire watching Mick Foley fall from the cell. Now, Lyra Valkyria found hers watching Becky dance to the ring.
Well, that was Becky. She was the first, when I saw NXT, the very first thing I saw of NXT was her Irish dancing debut.
A girl from Dublin, watching another make it out. That journey came full circle when Becky returned to NXT to win the one title she never had, then passed it to Lyra, torch to flame. She returned to Raw for one last climb. WrestleMania 40, Rhea Ripley, a generational collision. She lost, clean, tried to rebound, faced Liv Morgan, but the crowd wasn't with her. Liv beat her, and Becky disappeared again. Then, at WrestleMania 41, Becky Hogan struck again. She came back to take Bayley's spot. She walked down the ramp beside Lyra Valkyria like it was destiny, but it wasn't. The crowd rose out of memory, out of muscle, still clinging to the silhouette of who she used to be. The man, the fighter, the revolution. But that Becky, dead and buried under main events and resentment. This version didn't come to inspire. She came to correct the narrative, so she turned on Lyra, the girl who once watched Becky with wide eyes and dreamt, the so-called successor. But Becky didn't see herself in her. She saw a thief, a shadow, a tribute act playing dress-up in her legacy. Becky tore into her, said Lyra would still be folding gym mats if Becky hadn't kicked the doors down first. Said she built the road, but Lyra fought back, cut her, dropped her, beat her, clean. And Becky Lynch, scarred and silent, walked onto Raw and finally told the truth.
Do you want to know why I walked away from this for almost a year? Because you asked me to.
She said the fans didn't love success. They worshipped struggle. That the second she stopped crawling, they stopped chanting. They turned her into a statue, then smashed it when it started looking down at them. So she stopped asking. She tore Bayley apart, called her hugs hollow and her past overhyped. She humiliated Lyra, called her a plastic heir with borrowed wings. She buried the locker room, buried the fans, and made them all watch. Because Becky Lynch is no longer the heart of the division. She's the hammer that shatters it. The fans call her bitter. They call her Becky Hogan. They say she stayed too long, says she wins a lot. But the truth? They hate her because she's still the best to ever do it. Because she did what none of them could. She never lost her fire. She focused it. She doesn't fight for the revolution anymore. She fights to remind them who made it possible. And the real reason people hate Becky Lynch, it's because she's way better than them. If you made it this far, don't miss the full story of Charlotte Flair. And if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe, and stay tuned for weekly videos ahead.